party people! Welcome once again to the Party of One podcast, where the gaming table is always set for two. I am your host as always, Jeff Stormer, screaming into his phone because his Blue Yeti is on the fritz. This week I am joined by Richard Kreutz-Landry for a game of Era, an epic storytelling game designed to emulate myths like Conan, Hercules, Judge Dredd, and other big, legendary, epic tales. It's very cool, I had a lot of fun with this recording, and I can't wait for you to hear it. Richard, in addition to just being an all-around good dude, is one of the design team behind the upcoming role-playing game Descent into Midnight, which is the game about psychic defenders of an undersea kingdom. It sounds dope as hell, and I cannot wait for you to hear more about it. You can check that out at descentintomidnight.com. You can also find more information about Era in the show notes. Before we dive in, I have two shows that I want to tell you about in the next few weeks that I think you're going to be pretty excited about. First, I am sitting down with my good friends at the Plus Two Comedy Podcast Thursday, December 7th at 8 p.m., recorded live at Gamers Vault in Medford, New Jersey, to talk about Party of One, All My Fantasy Children, and most importantly, the Talkin' Nogcast. If you're in the Jersey area, you should come out. It's going to be a lot of fun. There's also going to be a game with a giveaway and a prize if you bring a prize to wager yourself. So if you're in the Jersey area, come out, bring a prize to wager. It's going to be a blast. You can also watch that live at twitch.tv/plus2comedy. Then, on December 17th, our friends at Everything is Awesome are celebrating their 100th episode with a live doubleheader. First at 3:30 p.m., there will be a live recording of Heart Points, which is a two-player Dungeon World podcast. Obviously, being a two-player role-playing game podcast, it is very close to my heart, and I've discovered it recently, and I'm very excited to see it live, because it's very, very good! And then at 4:30, there will be the Everything is Awesome, which will be an actual play run by yours truly. I'll be running my upcoming role-playing game, Mission Accomplished, the RPG of super spies and terrible office meetings. It's going to be real cool. You're going to want to see that. That's going to be at Amalgam Comics and Coffee House in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. December 17th, starting at 3:30. Everything is Awesome is on at 4:30. You're going to want to be there for the whole show. It's going to be cool as hell. And with all that out of the way, let's throw it over to me in the past so that he can get started with the show. Take it past me. Thanks, future me. This week I am sitting down with Richard Kreutz-Landry. Richard, thanks so much for coming on Party of One.
Hey, man, I'm super glad to be here. I've been listening to the show, working through the backlog. I've got, about 80 more episodes to go, but I'm looking forward to them.
That's doable. That's a doable backlog. So, at the top of the show, as we always like to do, I want to throw it over to you and talk about any cool projects you're working on, any neat, innovative role-playing games that you're developing that you might want to talk about, that sort of thing.
So I am actually working on a game called Descent into Midnight right now. It's a Powered by the Apocalypse game where you take on the role of sea creatures that you build yourself. They've got psionic powers, they have a mental link to each other, a shared sanctuary that you build out through like a meditation technique at the beginning of the session. And they're fighting against this like otherworldly corruption. It's super awesome. If you want more information, you can head over to at DIM, that's for Descent into Midnight RPG on Twitter, or just descentintomidnight.com.
Excellent. So this week, we are playing Era, which is an epic storytelling game of epic lone heroes. It is a game that I've wanted to feature on the show for a long time. It is designed that you can play stories of a single, legendary protagonist in a wide variety of settings. This week we are playing classic fantasy, and I'm very excited about it. So why don't you introduce us to your character this week?
Sure. So actually reading the book brought to mind, Conan and these Viking legends or everything. And so I immediately went a different direction. I went with a short, dumpy little fire wizard named Belthar Ignis Flamehammer IV. And his whole deal is that, he was cursed with the boiling blood of dragons. He was born in the shadow of black scales wings. He's got spells, and he's not afraid to tell you at length about how amazing he is. But he's not really a fighter. He's more the kind of guy who's going to, incinerate you and everyone you love, and then tell stories about it later. But I don't know that he's ever picked up a sword or had the inclination to do that.
I love it. This is extremely good, and I'm extremely excited. So a game of Era is made up of 7 scenes, which is called a cycle. We are going to tell this legendary chapter of our legendary hero story. The first thing that we do is we set up one of our 7 gateway scenes. Each scene is made up of one of 5 elements. Those 5 elements are fire, which represents combat and physical triumph. Craft, which is dark magic and summoning spirits and sort of creepy arcane things. Song, which is charm and interaction and manipulation and negotiation. Granite, which is the uncovering of lore and the solving of mysteries. And then ice, which is agility and dashing and daring do and all of that good stuff. So, I'm going to choose one of these elements, and then I'm going to integrate it into the scene, and then you're going to choose a second element, and you're going to sort of color in the rest of that scene with that.
Excellent.
So, I am going to say, our first scene is a granite scene. It is a mystery. We open on the small mining town of Castleford. Castleford, in the shadow of the eponymous castle, it is this big, old, kind of abandoned fort. And it's sort of an industrious mining town, there's not a lot to it. Not really the kind of town where heroes go out or where, people come in. It's quiet, it's quaint, it's out of the way. It's the kind of town where nothing really happens.
Nobody comes, nobody goes, it's terrible.
Yeah, basically.
Is that the Waiting for Godot quote? Something like that.
Something like that. It's exactly that, right? It's a nowhere town. It's except you have received a letter from an old contact. An old contact by the name of Hogarth Sexton. Hogarth Sexton was an investigator in the town of Castleford. The two of you went to wizard school together. The two of you went to the academy together. Mm-hmm. And he sort of became this arcane investigator, and you went off to claim your fortune. And he's written you because he says, I think I need your particular set of skills to put away something that is larger than either of us. I think I've stumbled onto something in Castleford that I don't think I'm properly equipped for.
All right. So shall we add another thing? Let's go ahead and add craft as well. And let's say, do we know, did he say what it was at all?
Yes. The letter describes a crack in the earth, a breaking, a vein in a mine deep underneath Castleford that Hogarth swears is growing. It's like they struck oil, but that oil is just emptiness, and it's just a void that seems to be growing. But he swears the problem is that no one is acknowledging this. He has found these reports and he has seen it. The letter states that I've seen it with my own 2 eyes, but no one will acknowledge this creeping chasm that could consume Castleford, if not the world.
That does not sound good. All right. So yeah, let's go ahead and add craft as the other element for this scene.
Okay.
And having to do with sort of the arcane, dark arts and all that. I want to say that there is an old sort of hedge witch, maybe, who sort of is the sort of raving old lady that lives out on the edge of town, and if you get into a mining accident, she's sort of the last resort if if nothing else works as far as, getting healed and all that. And we'll call her, let's call her Old Lady Jenkins. Jenkins is a good name for an old head witch lady.
Can't go wrong with Old Lady Jenkins.
Yeah. And I'd say that maybe she knows something. Maybe she's the one person that Hogarth has not gone to talk to. Maybe because there's some history there. I
like that. Yeah, I think it's also that there's kind of a stigma to it, right? Like, you don't necessarily, because if he were to go to Old Lady Jenkins, that kind of implies that, like, something is seriously wrong, and with the sort of conspiracy that he's describing to you, it feels like that might tip people off that he's trying to investigate something.
Yeah.
When it seems like this sort of, like, aggressive denial that anything is happening.
Yeah, I like that.
All right, so Belthar Ignis Flamehammer IV travels on the road to Castleford, the mining town. He comes to the outskirts of town and stumbles across this old, run-down, ramshackle cottage. This must be Old Lady Jenkins' place that Hogarth told me about in the letter.
Yes, it is. It looks almost like you would swear it was just like a shed. It's like a one-room, tiny, like, half wood and half, like, aluminum, for lack of a better term. Like, it's beaten down. You knock, the door swings open, and you peek your head inside, and it's...
Hello? It is I, Belthar Ignis Flamehammer IV.
Your voice echoes out in a way that it shouldn't in this one-room shed, and you look around, and it is a sprawling manor. There are shelves upon shelves, and rows on rows and shelves, and there's a huge alchemist's lab. It is a complex.
It's bigger on the inside. Huh. Who would have thought?
So,
how dare you? How dare you?
It had to be done.
How dare you bring this into my? How dare you bring this into my home? So, yeah, you look around, and Old Lady Jenkins, you feel a tapping on your shoulder, like a hard thunk of wood, and you turn around, and Old Lady Jenkins, all tattered rags with a big curled staff, is kind of standing behind you, and she just says, "Took you long enough."
Yeah. I mean, hello. Wait.
Come, there's much to discuss.
Yes, there is.
And she starts, like, handing you off books and things, and sort of, like, trying to, like, catch you up to speed, but almost like she knew more than she should have any right to know.
Yeah, she knows what's up.
So why don't we make some rolls?
Okay.
Let's determine how this scene goes from. So, rolls in Era is there are 3 phases. We're going to make 3 rolls, and that'll determine your success in unearthing sort of the nature of this conspiracy. So, I think this is a good opportunity for a conflict.
Okay.
To sort of understand, like, where you are in the conspiracy, right? So the way conflicts work in Era, the first thing we do is we determine our elements, and we determine our intent. Our elements are the elements that we've chosen for the scene, so we already have them in front of us. That would be granite and craft. And then we each determine our intent, what we want out of this exchange. So what I want, my intent is to keep you from figuring out what the chasm is. You know, the conspiracy, the mystery is trying to keep itself hidden from you.
I think Belthar's intent is to he wants to figure out who is in charge of the conspiracy. Like, he's not as concerned about fixing the actual problem at this point because he knows he can. So he wants to find out like why people are keeping it a secret and who's in charge.
That makes sense. All right, yeah, I can get down with that. So, now that we've kind of gotten our intent down, now we determine our dice pool. To determine a dice pool, you're going to take the following things. You're going to take one of the elements involved in your conflict. So for me, I am going to take my granite, because my granite represents the conspiracy in the shadows. So I'm going to take a D8, and you can take 2 of your trappings. Your trappings are things in your possession. They are Han Solo's blaster. They are Judge Dredd's hover bike, that sort of thing. So you can take 2 of those, the dice associated with them, provided that they fit with the element given in the scene, and 2 pieces of lore. The lore being, the legend of your legendary hero.
Okay. So, looking at that, I've got a D10 in craft for being an incinerator of lesser beings. But I feel like the granite actually fits better, even though it's lower. He's the keeper of arcane mysteries, which feels more in keeping with this, because I don't think he's gonna threaten to just burn her to a crisp, which I feel like would be more the incinerator thing. He doesn't really have any trappings that are gonna help. But as far as lore, he was the decipherer of Crandall's last will and testament, which was just a whole big mess with lots of people involved and nasty secrets. So I think he's pretty good at that. So he's actually just running in there with 2d6 as his pool.
Okay. So, if possible, we have 3 phases. You want to assign at least 1 dice to every phase, if possible. Since you only have 2 dice, you can only assign them to 2 of the 3 phases. You'll have 1d6 in each of those.
Yep.
So, I'm going to lay out my dice pool, and then I will tell you, because I don't actually roll the dice. The way that it works for adversaries, or for adversaries, is I just give you the number that you have to beat.
All right.
There's 4 levels. I'm going to call this a minion level. I don't think this is fairly... I want to get you into this. This is kind of like hooking you into things. So I think I'm going to keep this as fairly low difficulty. But so I have 3 dice that I'm throwing in. A D8 of granite, because this is a conspiracy in the shadows. A D6 for a trapping of Old Lady Jenkins, because you don't know if you can trust her, and she seems to know more than she's letting on. And a D6 for a piece of lore, which is something ancient, powerful, and as old as time itself.
Yikes.
So for each of those, that means I have 3 dice, which means 1 dice goes into every dice pool.
All right.
You're going to want to beat the following numbers: 2, and then the second phase the second and third phases you'll want to just roll higher than a 1.
Okay. So let's start out with the first one.
Okay.
Dropping a D6 into that, and I got a 3.
Okay, you have succeeded in the first phase. You piece together, you start looking through things, and you figure out that there's something in that fort. You're looking through old history books, and there doesn't seem to be any reason for there to be a fort here. It's not an especially tactical location. It's not especially... Oh, wait, no, never mind. I take all of that back. We're supposed to do that later.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah. So go ahead and roll your other 2 dice.
All right.
So you succeeded in the first phase. Roll your other 2 dice.
So the second phase, I would say, would be that was the Lady Jenkins one. I think I'm just gonna forfeit that. I think we'll leave the mystery there.
Okay.
And then the last one, the ancient whatchamacallit rolled a 4, so he's got this.
Okay, excellent. So you have won the most phases, which means that in our next phase, which is declaration, you get to make the first declaration. The way this works is we now collaboratively decide the results of this conflict.
Okay.
You make a declaration first. We make 3 declarations because we had 3 phases of dice rolling.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll have between 3 and 5 declarations each time. We have 3, so you'll make one, and then I will make one. And yeah, you'll make one, I'll make a second one, you'll make the third one.
So I think based on what he's found, he finds that there is an old family as part of this, this old mining town, and the sort of headman of the village is actually descended from the lord who built the castle here and has fallen on hard times. And so, like 5 or 6 generations ago, they were nobility, but now they're just head of the peasants.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You also find that there's a lot of... So this fort, you're looking into the history of it, and there's not really a clear reason why it exists. It's not especially a tactical location. It wasn't a place that was being fought over. This is so out of the way that there's no reason for a military presence to be here. There's some other reason why they felt the need to build battlements, but all of that stuff seems to be, wiped from the history books. This fort seems to exist, but no one can quite point to why that is.
Interesting. All right. And then we have one more, right? One more declaration?
Yes.
All right. So I think the other thing that he figures out is he's looking at sort of the sketches of the castle from different eras, different pictures in these books, and he notices that while the sort of run down look of it now, everything is set up to look like sort of your average castle. When it was first built, it looked weird and strange, and after staring at it for a while, he realizes that with a normal castle, everything is built so that it's built in defensive layers, right? So if you get through the first outer wall, you move to the next wall, etc., etc. Only with this, it's backwards. The layers seem to be focused on keeping something in instead of keeping something out.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's fantastic. Okay. So, you've unearthed a little bit of this mystery. There's something in that fort that seems to be kept in, not out. There's still this gaping chasm. There seems to be something or someone, wiping history, chunks of history from Castleford. And now we begin setting up our pathway scenes. These are the scenes in which you take on the challenge head on, and sort of we build towards our big climax.
Right.
There are 5 of these scenes, one of which will involve every one of our 5 elements. And there's some particulars that I'll get into as we go. But as you won, you kind of get to pick the first element of the first pathway scene. What does Belthar do next?
I think that he is going to attempt to make a stealthy reconnoiter of the castle itself, which is kind of funny because he's a dumpy little short dude in sweet wizard robes that is not at all subtle. Mm-hmm. But that's his plan. Most of what he's been able to do that in the past because, back at the Wizard Academy, everybody was wearing sweet wizard robes, and, that was just how things were. So now that he's out in the world and really getting into those adventures, he hasn't quite grasped that that part of things yet, but he's going to try. So element-wise, I think that would be ice, because he's going to try and sneakily get around.
Okay, fantastic. Now I get to choose the second element of the scene, and for this, I am going to choose, if you are trying to sneak into the fort, I think it is going to be fire.
Oh, good. He likes fire.
I think this is a well-protected fort, right? Too protected for being out in the middle of nowhere, but it's well protected. And I think, you can sneak in, but I think they're kind of, especially now with sort of this creeping chasm, I think now they're way more willing to, if they see someone sneaking around, just take them out outright. Like, the town guard is told to just make anyone go away. So, now we begin putting our dice pools together.
All right.
Using our fire and ice elements. As we describe the scene, we put our dice pools together. The first dice I'm going to add in is a D6 for spies, mundane, and arcane. As sort of, these town guards are all kind of like shifty-eyed and looking at each other, like keeping close eyes, almost like patrolling a jail or a prison. Mm-hmm. They're watching each other, and they're making sure that like they're making sure that no one gets in, and they're making sure that they look casual, that they don't look like they're making a scene.
Mm-hmm. All right. I'm gonna throw in his D4 for mildly asthmatic for ice. I think that one of the things he's going to try to do is climb over the wall. At one of the points where it's broken down a little bit, and he's going to have to struggle to not give himself away by panting loudly, as exercise is not something that he is regularly involved in.
Okay, for my next, I am going to drop in a D4 of lore, which is that the lore is knowledge beyond natural. And, like, you're creeping along, and you're sort of, you have to hide behind a wall, right? Mm-hmm. As two guards walk by, and you hear them talking, and you hear one of them say to the other, "We have to be on lookout. The omen said that there would be an interloper on the fort on this night. We cannot allow that to happen. Something has foretold that you would be here. Something that couldn't have possibly have known, because you are Belthar, and then you make your own decisions. There is nothing that makes decisions for you. But something has knowledge otherworldly that has foreseen you coming to this spot."
All right. I'm going to then contest that with a D10 of fire, because he has been cursed by the boiling blood of dragons. And I think that this sort of premonition, this power, this fate that has swept him up in it, he has been prepared for that, and some other greater force has destined him to be here and to do this. It's not just that he is here to be stopped; it is here that that he's here to stop it as well.
And the last dice that I'm going to add is another piece of lore, because none of my trappings really fit here. And that is a D8 of fire for Warlord of the Ancient Armies. Ooh. You watch these soldiers walking around, this like town guard, right? It's a town guard for a mining community out in the middle of nowhere. They should not be armored and trained in the way they are, but you're watching them march, and they are precise, almost like clockwork. They're perfectly in sync. They are armed to the teeth, and you can tell, like, the way that they carry their swords on their side, they're trained in using them.
All right.
This army has seemingly been united and been fortified by something. But what could fortify an army in this way?
All right. I think for my last thing, I'm going to save the one I was thinking of, but I'm going to go with his trapping of... he actually he grew up in a long line of wizards and sorcerers and etc. So he actually inherited Usain the Speedy's golden sandals of alacrity.
Okay,
so
that's perfect. That is a very good trapping to use here.
So he is going to use that to scurry out of the way as this patrol of guards that he was not expecting them to be so vigilant is coming around a corner, and so he scurries away into a dark corner and holds his breath as they trump by in their noisy armor and kit.
Okay, perfect. You have the option of dropping in another trapping or another piece of lore if you like. Because I believe you used one piece of lore, one trapping, and one dice, right?
Right.
So you have the option of 2 more dice if you'd like. I have nothing else I can really add here, especially within the elements of fire and ice.
All right. I am going to drop in an additional D4 because he is the fastest wand in the West. End of the 3rd floor of the dormitory in the wizard school.
Perfect. Excellent. Okay. Well, now we break our dice into 3 phases.
Alrighty.
So now we resolve the scene. The way this works is I give you 3 challenge numbers based on the dice that I've assembled. You can assemble your dice into whichever order you like from there, and then we make our declarations. I'm going to call this a standard challenge. This is a little trickier because you're starting to get into dangerous territory. So it is going to be a 2, a 3, and a 4. Are my 3 phases. Those are the 3 numbers that you want to beat. So you can arrange your 4 dice into any which way you want.
Okay. But
you have to put at least 1 dice into each.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and start off facing off against that 2 with a D6.
Okay.
And got a 6.
Fantastic.
We're going to go against the 3 with a pair of D4s. And got a 4. And we're going against the 4 with a D10, and he made it with a 6.
Fantastic.
All right.
Okay. So now you actually get to make 3 declarations, all of which come true because you won all 3 phases of the conflict. Tell me what happens.
So Belthar is, of course, being very much the hero of his own story, narrating it to himself as he goes very quietly.
Well, Belthar has snuck past those silly guards, talking about who knows what. Oh, they almost got me, but I'm too quick for them. Ha-ha!
So he lets them go by, and he's sneaking through. He's gotten up over that broken part of the wall. He's worked his way in. I think he gets to a point where there is like a pair of guards outside of some sort of like central keep or something, and there is. One of them very obviously like has a key around their neck, and it looks like okay, this goes into something that is well guarded, and like this is the place to be. He's pretty sure that that's the way he needs to go. The second thing would be that they switched the guard out. Like on the hour, and he hears them talking about that, so he knows when the next they're gonna switch next. And the third thing I would say is that there's...
Well, I'd say that actually, I think that's probably a pretty good three things, right?
Yeah.
You've avoided the guards, you've gotten the key, you know there's no guards around when you find where to use the key.
Yeah.
I think that's a good three declarations, and I think that actually really nicely sets up our next scene.
Okay.
So, for our next scene, and for all subsequent scenes until we get to our finale, we're going to follow the same structure where we choose two elements, but they can't be the elements we used in the previous scene. They have to be different elements, and over the next 4 scenes, we have to use all 4 elements twice. So,
Okay.
all of that is to say, you find sort of a chamber. It's in the you make your way through a few layers of this fort, right?
Awesome.
You find your way through a few levels of protections, and you find your way into this chamber. You open the key, and it's this long, twisting skeleton key, right? Like, it doesn't look like it looks like it's made for such a particular lock that you almost don't recognize it as a key at first. You open the door, and there is an obelisk in the middle of the room. Perfect, beautiful, sort of a purple crystal, right? Mm-hmm. But it's been cracked and broken.
Ooh.
And and you walk in and there's a pulse of energy. And I'm going to say the element for this scene is craft.
All right.
Now you choose... no, I'm sorry. Actually, you choose the first element of that scene.
That's exactly what I would have gone with.
Perfect. Craft is the first element. Then I get to choose the second element, and I am going to go with granite. I'm gonna go with granite because, like, you're surrounded... Like, this is a weird thing that they're protecting, and you have to try to understand it.
All right. And now we build the dice pool, yeah?
Yes. I'm going to start with a D12.
Ooh.
Which is powers arcane and otherworldly. There's not even necessarily like evil or dark magic. There's weird magic in here. Like this is not something they taught you in school. Mm-hmm. And you're feeling like physics. Like you kind of you open the door, you walk inside and your hat starts to float away a little bit and you kind of have to catch it. And you start walking towards it, and suddenly you find yourself walking on the wall. Like physics and the laws of nature are starting to not work here.
Okay. Then I'm gonna go ahead with my element. I'm gonna go for craft, and he is an incinerator of lesser beings. He has no fear that he has the power necessary to do what needs to be done here, whether that is, sort of wielding just arcane energies or just blasting this thing into Kingdom Come.
Awesome. I am also going to add... this is really neat. This is a thing I like about the system, is I'm starting to, like... By stating the things that I've written into my challenges lore, I'm starting to tell you about the world in ways that your character hasn't quite figured out yet. So you're kind of so you, the player, are starting to get the sense of what's happening even before your character does. And it informs the choices that you're going to make later.
Right.
All of that is to say, I'm going to drop in a D10 for my craft lore, a god in the void.
Oh, no. All right. He does not have any trappings that will help. So he's got his lore. We're going to go back to the Decipher of Crandall's Last Will and Testament, because that was actually a dispute over an old magical item, and that's what the whole mystery was about. Is all these people jockeying to gain possession of this old scepter.
Okay. I'm also going to add a D6 of granite lore, which is a secret, which is as old as time itself. So, it's that you've seen, this is clearly what they've been protecting for generations. So clearly what was here is something that is old and important, and now it's broken in a way that, like, it shouldn't have been.
Mm-hmm. And he's going to come back with craft, a D8. He was born in the shadow of Blackscale's wings, and so there is sort of that shadow, this darkness over his life that has sort of been there in his family for generations as well. Blackscale being one of the oldest dragons in the land, with a reputation for strange knowledge and mysteries and powers that other dragons of legend just don't have.
I don't have anything else I can add. If you have anything else you want to throw in, you can throw in.
Nope, that's it. That's all he's got.
Okay, great. So we do our 3 phases of conflict. The numbers you're going to want to beat are phase 1 is a 3, phase 2 is a 5, and phase 3 is a 6.
Ooh, all right. We're gonna start against that 3 with a D6. And nope, that's a 1. We're looking against a 5 on a D8. That's a big fat nope. And it was a 6, right, for the last one?
Yep.
And that's a 3. He's not doing so hot.
Rad. Excellent. 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 I get to make 3 declarations.
Which I feel like is perfect for... He's feeling like, oh, I'm so smart, I'm doing great, and then he walks into this room and is like, duh.
You actually know what this is, and that's why this is terrible.
Okay.
The first declaration is you actually immediately recognize this as a binding stone. This is something that was put into place to keep someone in essentially a pocket dimension. You've seen these used in some of the arcane prison, which is the sort of establishment of the Sky City.
Yeah,
it's one of their less popular practices because it's pretty horrific. They craft a stone and they put someone basically in the stone and put them like in a void.
Okay, so they Superman them.
They Superman them. Okay. Yeah, it's Supermaning somebody. The second declaration is you're looking at it. You kind of peer into one of the broken fragments of the binding stone, and you see the mine. You see, and you're seeing more of the mine every second. And the third, and setting up our next scene, is it takes you a moment too long to feel the the slimy tentacle entangling your ankle as something from the binding stone starts to snake its way out around your ankle.
Oh, this is excellent.
Yep. So for our next scene, we cannot choose craft or granite.
All right.
So our options are fire, ice, and for our first element.
It's Song of Fire or Ice.
Get out. We're done now. This episode is never coming out. So for our first element, our options are either fire or song, and I'm gonna go with fire. This is definitely a fire scene. Something you turn and there is something, tentacles and fan, like a viscous cloud of tentacles and fangs has started to ooze out of one of these broken fragments, almost like something is crawling out of the void.
Oh, all right.
And now you may choose either ice or song as your second element.
I'm gonna go with song. I think it's time for him to let this thing know who's boss, if at all possible.
Okay. First element. I'm going to throw a d6 at you. As this thing is one of my spies, mundane and arcane. This otherworldly creature, you get the sense that this is not, you get a mystical sense that this is not the thing. This is one of its minions, right?
Okay.
It is something that it sent at you to sort of dispatch you, stop you from stopping this.
Okay. I'm gonna go in with song, a D8 because
I'm the greatest wizard you've ever heard of. You have heard of me, right?
I love it. I am now also going to throw at you a d8 for my trapping, which is the assassin beast.
no. All right. He's going to respond with fire. One of his signature abilities that got him into a great deal of trouble back at the wizard school was his penchant for using Blackscale the Terrible's fiery breath.
I love it.
It's a great party trick, but only until things start burning down around you at the party, and then people don't invite you back, and yeah.
I'm also going to throw at you another d8 for, again, Warlord of Ancient Armies. This thing is a conjuration of something ancient and terrible.
All right.
It's like lumbering towards you, and the smoke is starting to surround you, and it is clear that it is going to dispatch you effortlessly if you do not act decisively.
All right. He's going to use his trapping of fire, his D10 cursed by the boiling blood of dragons, because this is what it's all about.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep, that's all I got. So those are my 3 pools. If there's anything else you want to add,
you can add 2 trappings, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, he's going to add a D6 for
I am Belthar Ignis Flamehammer IV.
Perfect. I love it.
All right, let's do it.
So, okay. The numbers that you have to beat are a 3, a 4, and a 4.
All right. So first up, we'll do the 3 on a D8. That's an 8.
Fabulous.
The 4 with a D8 and a D6. And he just makes that. And then
Excellent.
he's looking at, what was it, a 5? No, another 4 on a D10.
Another 4.
Nope. So he won 2 out of 3.
Okay. So you get to make the first declaration, and then I'll make one, and then you'll make a second one. And this will set up our next scene.
Okay, so I think that his reaction to this at first is sort of he's looking at it and
Is that a binding stone? Wow!
and he's he's just like, wow, that's really good. Wait, no, that's bad. And then he feels the sort of slimy tentacles reaching out for him. And I think the first thing he does is he just, he is small. And he had been bullied a little bit before people realized that he could burn your face off. And so his first instinct is to, stomp down on the top of your foot. And so that's what he does, is he stomps on the first little tentacle that comes for him, and it sort of pulls back, not quite expecting that from this little dumpy dude.
Rad. The declaration I will make is, my declaration is, it reels back. You stomp on the tentacle, you kind of force it back a little bit. But there's a second aspect to the assassin beast that you don't fully get a handle on until it's a moment too late. Which is that smoke, the smoke that it is sort of surrounding you, and you're starting to see shapes. You're starting to see shapes that are not of this world. It seems to be surrounding you, right? Mm-hmm. It seems to be dragging or like bringing, not necessarily taking you to another place, but bringing pieces of this other place to you.
Right. So I think for the third declaration, one of the things that he has to do the fiery breath is he sort of like he takes a deep breath, and some of that smoke kind of gets into his lungs right before he sort of erupts with fire, and creates sort of this like, flamethrower effect that sort of shrinks the thing back. But there's that, he has now taken in part of this darkness as he blows this, before he blows this fire, to push the creature back.
Excellent. So yeah, you blow the creature away, right? Mm-hmm. You torch it. But you're in this fog now. And that starts our next pathway scene, okay. Which, as the person who got 2 declarations, you get to dictate whether your 2 elements of choice are granite or song.
I think... Oh, okay. Let's go with granite. I think the realization of sort of like what this is and what it could be is starting to set in. Mm-hmm. And as he has pulled that inside of himself, he gets that like that instant connection and recognition of like, oh, this is beyond my experience, and there's that sort of weird tentative connection between him and this otherworldly thing, now that there is a part of him that is that thing.
And I'm going to go with craft as the second element, because you're in this otherworldly place, and you have to understand. I think the challenge is like understanding and trying to adapt to basically the otherworldly reality that has sort of that is sort of around you now. Like you're not, you can still tell that you're in the summoning chamber, or the binding chamber, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But like you feel this other world, this other dimension kind of surrounding you, and it's kind of understanding, almost having to reteach yourself like the laws of like gravity and things.
Right.
So so I'm going to throw a D12 at you. Ooh. For powers arcane and otherworldly. As like I said, like it's just there's all like Kirby crackle in the air, so there's just pulsating energy, and you're seeing like asteroids floating around, like it's all real deep space cosmic magic type shit.
Mm-hmm. I think he's still trusting to his superiority, even though like in the face of this this raw power and weirdness, in the sense that he might be in over his head. I think he's doubling down on like, who I am an incinerator of lesser beings. Like I am this hero. I am not going to succumb just because this thing that might be more powerful than me, that hopefully isn't, is trying to take me down.
All right. I'm going to now add... I don't have any real trappings. Yeah, I do. I'm going to add a D4 from craft, as you see floating on these like stones, like you see sort of surrounding you, ancient, their skin withered and tight on their bones, generation upon generation of the Ford clan, the people that founded Castle Rock, seemingly all dragged into this otherworldly abyss at some point, or perhaps even willingly gave themselves over, floating around, all surrounding something. but, like, clearly this has been a pact that they have made for generations that always ends with them floating endlessly in a void.
That's terrifying.
Right?
I think I'm gonna bring in again the Decipher of Crandall's Last Will and Testament. I think floating in the void is, there's all these weird, strange shapes, but among them, you have these sort of like old desiccated Fords and everything. But I like to think that there's also the bones of other people that they have sacrificed to this place, sort of floating around, and he grabs this like femur and wields it like a magic wand. Like,
that's rad. That rules. I'm going to throw another D10 at you for craft. The God in the Void. Now you see what all of the Ford clan members are floating around. What these generations of old, like, aristocrats are floating around. And it is bound to one of these massive asteroids with glowing iridescent shackles. It is Azektorak, the shackled god of tyranny.
Ooh. Okay. I think what's going to happen is he's going to focus this energy that he has into this femur that he's wielding, right? He's remembering the scepter, and he's doubled down on his identity that he is Belthar Ignis Flamehammer IV, and from his back, because this is not a part of reality. This is something else entirely. Wings like black scales, whose blood may or may not truly run through his veins, erupt, and he uses that to fly forward toward this god. So,
Rad
yes,
as
born in the shadow of black scales' wings.
And I think the last dice I'm gonna throw at you is a D6 of granite, because I think bound as he is to these shackles, he is still, Azektorak is still as old as time, and still knows all of your tricks and has seen them 1,000 times over. Mm-hmm. And suddenly, like, energy begins crackling around him as he prepares to take you on head on.
Mm-hmm.
So now we roll our dice. 3 phases. This is going to be an epic challenge. This is going to be an elite. This is going to be a legendary challenge.
Yeah.
What am I talking about?
I think he's going to get his butt handed to him. It's going to be great.
You're going to want a 10. There 3 are a 10, and a 12.
All right. Well, considering I've got a D10, a D6, and a D8, we'll see how this goes.
Yep.
All right. We got an 8, we got a 1, and we got a 2. So so he's charging headlong into this, and with the other hand that isn't holding the femur, he pulls out his actual wand and is flying straight towards it with batwing or with dragon wings. And then whatever you want to happen is going to happen. It's going to be real bad.
You collide with the form of Azektorak, and suddenly you are back in the summoning chamber. The assassin beast is dead in front of you. This was all a construct of the assassin beast. But you suddenly feel... That's the first declaration. The second declaration is you suddenly feel a tickle, you feel something, a pulse, a heartbeat, but also a pulsing in your head. Dunk, dunk. Third deck, and suddenly that pulsing stops, and you just hear Belthar Ignis Flamehammer IV. It is a pleasure to make your acquaintance at last. And the third and final declaration is clawed hands on the other side of town begin pulling themselves out of the creeping chasm.
Oh, this is not good.
Our final pathway scene, is made up of the following two elements: song and ice. You hear the voice of Azektarak in your head as he tries to use his true powers of corruption and seduction and manipulation. Meanwhile, the town begins to be beset by these sort of otherworldly horrors. So the challenge now becomes resisting Azektarak and not becoming under his thrall, as so many in Castleford have. But also as bat-winged horrors begin descending on the fort and the town, simply avoiding them. So the first dice I'm going to throw at you is a D10 of song for Seducer and Manipulator, as he merely begins whispering in your ear, promising you power and greatness and the glory that Belthar so desperately yearns for.
Oh, see, I want to respond to that with his D8 and song that he's the greatest wizard you've ever heard of, but I almost feel like, you know what, I am actually going to go with the D4 for mildly asthmatic, because I think that in this moment he is realizing how outclassed he is, and so I think for this beat at least, it makes more sense for him to be to fail a little bit at that.
I'm now going to throw at you a D6 of song for I Know Your Secret Desires. He's playing on your insecurity. He's playing on the fact that you know you're outclassed now. He is trying to draw you into this.
I think I'm going to respond to that with his trapping of Usain the Speedy's golden sandals of alacrity. Like he is, as he steps back from the sort of weirdly, smoking remains of the assassin beast, he steps on, a little bit of it, and he looks down and he sees these sandals, and he's reminded of the legacy that he's a part of. And that, he remembers the vague hints that, his family has had a purpose, and he wonders if, this is what he's been bred for, to be a protector against this sort of thing. Even while Azektarak is promising him that, that he is the destiny that he was meant for.
Cool as hell. The last thing I'm going to throw at you is a D4 of ice for the lore of you find yourself surrounded now. There are these horrors of all shapes and sizes have taken the fort, right? Soldiers are fighting, but also some soldiers are standing right alongside them and turning into these things themselves. You're surrounded, and basically Azektarak just kind of whispers in your ear, there are two ways out of this. There is with me, and there is to escape into the grave. And I'm going to drop that D4 for I see all and I know all.
And I think I am going to drop in the D6 of I am Belthar Ignis Flamehammer IV. Oh, sorry.
I am Belthar Ignis Flamehammer IV.
Because this is his legacy. His legacy is to be strong. Maybe.
Okay. I have no more dice if there's anything else you want to throw in.
I'm going to throw in a D4 for fastest wand in the west end of the third floor of the dormitory and wizard school, because while all of this is going on, I think he looks down and he realizes that the thing that he had physically picked up in his other hand, he has his wand out in his left hand, like he did in the vision, but in his right hand, he sees a discarded chicken bone from one of the guards who'd been, eating in that room, and it makes him laugh and realize, how ridiculous the vision was, that like this isn't reality. It bolsters him a little bit, I think.
Okay. The 4 numbers you want to get, or the 3 numbers you want to get, are a 4, a 6, and a 10.
All right.
And this will set up our final. Gateway scene.
All right. Let's go with the 2d4s for the. Actually, no. Yeah, we'll go with that against the first one. So the 4.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so he makes 1.
All right.
Then he rolls a 3 and a 6. So in order,
Okay.
that didn't make any of them, or except the first one. So he got 1.
Okay. First declaration is. I think the first declaration is. The first declaration is you hear a whisper in your ear that says, "You will fall just like your friend Sexton fell. You will die screaming. You will die powerless. And where you fell, a Zektorak will rise."
That's not cool. Okay. So my declaration on that is I think that actually what we didn't see when at the beginning because we saw the letter, right? We saw the letter from Sexton, from Hogarth. And like we get the shot where it sort of like scrolls down and then pauses, and you can see the text of the letter. But what we don't see, that we see now, is we go back to that shot and scroll down a little bit more, and it says "Love, Hogarth," with little X's and O's. And so that thing just pisses him off, and it just enrages him, and you see like the wand that he's got, he's spouting flames at some of these creatures who are coming up on the outskirts of town, and then you get also the shot where like the action movie thing where they've got the two like machine pistols and they're spinning around and doing that whole thing. Well, he's doing that with the wand and the chicken bone. Mm-hmm. So there's now flames spouting out from the chicken bone. He's taking out all these minions.
Yep. And the final declaration is and this sets up our final gateway scene, which I'll explain in a moment. You are roasting these monsters, right? You are destroying them, but and you shatter the bond between you and a Zektorak as you are recommitted to this earth. You are bolstered, you are powered, you unleash hell upon a Zektorak's minions, and in that moment, the binding stone shatters. All of the pieces explode.
Whoa!
And suddenly, like, the walls between this world and the otherworldly void, begin melting, and suddenly those clouds, those visions you saw earlier, that creeping chasm that you saw through the Binding Stone, start emerging all around you.
Oh.
And in one of them, shackled, but fighting, resilient, you see Hogarth Sexton. He lives, and you can rescue him.
Oh, yes. Yes. Okay.
So the final gateway scene. This is how we wrap it all up. You dictate you get to dictate the first element, I dictate the second. They can be any of the 5 elements that you want.
Ooh, I think fire has got to be number 1.
Okay.
I think
I'm going to go with craft as number 2. So describe fire. Describe fire.
So the interesting thing about Belthar is again his personal courage is sorely lacking, right? His physical courage is sorely lacking, but in this moment he has stepped up to the plate, and his sort of like the lifetime of D0 fire not in the face has shifted in this moment, and mechanically speaking he's going to go with craft and take his D10 incinerator of all things, but I think it's important that really it's his fire that's driving it in this moment.
Yeah. You have tapped into a reserve of magical power unlike that you've ever thought about before. Meanwhile,
it's the power of love.
Oh, go ahead.
Really.
Sorry.
It's the power of love, really.
Yeah. And I am going to tap my D12 powers arcane and otherworldly, as the walls of reality have begun to peel apart.
All right. And trappings, I mean, this is the very purpose of Blackscale's fiery breath. Blackscale is a dragon who has been around for ages, who has grown and cultivated the ability to destroy otherworldly threats with just the pure, unadulterated heat of his flame. And, he has given some small part of that to his chosen. And Belthar Ignis Flamehammer IV is the 4th of his name, and is totally going to use that to burn this guy up, because all his otherworldly stuff is just nonsense.
I'm going to add a D4 for the Ford clan, as these ancient wizards are sort of all in Congress and, using their power in unison to try and bolster the shackled god as he shatters as he hopefully shatters his shackles and finally arrives fully empowered into this world.
Oh man, and 100% cursed by the boiling blood of dragons. I think at this point, where the wings had disappeared before, because the lines between reality and this other place had been reestablished. Now that they're melting away, what we see is he sprouts again these dragon wings, but his features take on a sort of black scaly cast, and he looks 3 or 4 times taller, and what seems to be perhaps a tail and claws begin to form as he steps forward toward the place where the worlds have collided as the stone shattered.
I'm going to throw in a D10 for craft as a god in the void, as you see the shackles start to crack, and the stone that he has been bound to start to disassemble. as he begins to pierce the void and enter into the world.
And born in the shadow of Blackscale's wings. Like, he is no longer a shadow of Blackscale. He has become Blackscale. And that's a D8 in craft.
And finally, a D8 in fire. As the warlord of the ancient armies, he is commanding the Ford clan. He is commanding his monstrosities in the world. They are all descending on this moment, and that is a D8.
Whew. All right, and I think that's Belthar tapped out.
Yep. All right. So we have 3 faces. The numbers you want to get are an 8, a 9, and a 9.
Ooh. All right. Well, all right. We're gonna go for the 8 with a D8. Nope. We're gonna go for a 9 on a D10. That's a big fat nope. And we're gonna go for a 9 on a D8 plus a D10. And he made it. So we got 1 of 3.
Okay. So I make the 2 declarations. I make the first declaration. The first declaration is you are initially overpowered, right? There's just too much. You are unloading magical power unlike that you have ever used before, but it is simply too much, and the laws of reality simply no longer apply. You are simply overwhelmed at that first moment, and then what happens?
Ooh. I think in that moment, he has moved forward. He has stepped up, and he gets up to where Hogarth is, and he sees that he's shackled. He sees that he's trying to fight, and with one clawed hand reaching out, and holding back this onslaught as best he can. With the others, he rips through the chains that are binding Hogarth, and he tells him to run before turning his face back to this otherworldly presence and just breathing a huge gout of flame. And we've seen this flame before, and we know that it shifts color right as it sort of ends, as it comes to an end. Like when we saw the shot of him taking out the assassin beast, and there was this flame as it sort of faded back to reality, and it shifted just like to a blue color right at the end, and you see this huge gout of just of red, orange, white hot flame, but then it shifts to blue just as Hogarth is able to turn away, and we know that that's all he has in him.
And in that final moment, it seems, the armies of Azektarak have been fought back, right? But it just doesn't seem like you have enough power. And then you feel the hand on your shoulder. And then you turn and you see book of notes in hand, looking as impeccably dressed as ever, Hogarth. And he looks you in the eyes and he says, "You can tell me, but I will never run. Never in a moment like this." And he lets forth an incantation, and together your fire reignites, and it unloads on Azektarak, and he's blown back, and the two of you are blasted back through one of the chasms, and you hit the wall of the binding chamber, and suddenly as your energy begins to crackle and fade, and you regain your normal form, in a blast of blinding light, the stone is reformed. The chasms dissipate. People regain their shape. Hogarth is unconscious, aged, but alive.
Hoagie, are you all right? Tell me you're all right.
I knew I could count on you. I knew when I found the conspiracy that there was only one person ridiculous enough to even attempt what just happened. And he begins to laugh.
I think Belthar just sort of like takes his hand and like brings it to his own face, you know, and just like kind of puts it on his cheek and just kind of like hugs him.
I think Hogarth, he feels your cheek and he pulls you in for a kiss, and we get the dramatic shot of the two of you kissing and a pan out over all of the damage as the sun begins to rise on a new day in Castleford.
That's beautiful. I love it.
And that's game.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, Richard. This was super, super fun.
Yeah, man.
So, real quick, before we wrap up, where can people find your work online?
Oh, yes. So, as I said at the top of the episode, we've got Descent into Midnight at DIMRPG on Twitter. And you can find my stuff. I've got a website, origamigaming.com, that's got a little bit of gaming content, a little bit of origami stuff. But most active would be Twitter, and that's at R Kreutz-Landry, so that's RKREUTZLANDRY. Or you can probably find me if you hang around with all the podcasting folks. You'll see me commenting on stuff. But yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was an absolute treat. And now I'm going to throw it over to me in the future so that he can wrap up with the show. Take it, future me. Thanks, past me. And thanks again to Richard for coming onto the show. That game was so much fun. I loved it. It was really good. Be sure to follow Richard on Twitter at R Kreutz-Landry, follow Descent into Midnight on Twitter at DIMRPG, and check out more information about Era in the show notes below. Then, while you're on Twitter, you can follow this show at Party of One Pod, like the show at facebook.com/partyofonepodcast. If you enjoyed the show, consider giving us a nice iTunes review, a social media shout-out, or a word-of-mouth recommendation to a friend. All three of those things help us achieve bigger, better, and cooler things, find new audiences, and it's just a good experience all around. You can also consider backing us on Patreon at patreon.com/partyofonepodcast. Patreon backers get access to bonus material, mini podcasts, and interviews, and Patreon dollars help pay for hosting fees, equipment costs, and convention appearances. If you want to hear more from me, consider checking out All My Fantasy Children, the world-building and character creation podcast in which Aaron Catano-Saez and I take your listener prompts and spin them into beautiful, thriving, vibrant fantasy characters, the stuff of legend and the stuff of your favorite role-playing games. That can be found at allmyfantasychildren.com. Party of One is produced and edited by Jeff Stormer and Jen Frank. All music for the show comes from the song Infinite Lives by Megaran featuring the D&D Sluggers. If you'd like to inquire about advertising rates coming onto the show, or you just want to vent to me because a piece of electronics isn't working for you, because boy do I have stories about electronics not working for me, especially in the last few days, you can reach me at partyofonepodcast@gmail.com. Well, that's it for me. Until next time, thank you so much for listening. Remember to fight the forces of fascism every single day. Remember that self-love and self-care are radical and defiant acts of resistance. And as always, party on, everybody.
Never gonna die.